So my next question has to do with sports. Do you enjoy watching women play sports?
I think it depends on the sport. Basketball, no. I don't want to see a bunch of layups, no offense. I'm not a big fan of WNBA or just girls basketball in general. I'm a fan of soccer. I'm a fan of the sport. Mm-hmm. So maybe if I'm an NBA fan, I like basketball, but maybe if I was in love with the game, like I love soccer, maybe I'd be willing to see
just pure
right and
sport.
Notice the progression of the game and see plays come out. But so when it comes to soccer, though, I truly believe that women's soccer is better tactically than men's soccer, just from a game standpoint, because women may not have the same speed as a man, maybe the same, body strength as a man in certain situations. There's some diesel women out there that can body a guy, but tactically, when it comes to foot to ball, to making passes and making runs, and I think they play a better tactical game where they don't have to use speed as much. They don't have to use man on man as much, or player on player. Sorry. Yeah. Now, when it comes to like World Cup, men's World Cup, no doubt, more competition, better players. When it comes to the United States teams, women, they've been successful. They have great players, but that doesn't really say a lot because the rest of the world, soccer and women in sports isn't much of a priority. Not because they're oppressed in other countries, which in some cases that's true, but more because they're not going into that field. They're not going to be sports athlete. They're focused on other things. Mm-hmm. So to answer your question in short, yes, but only soccer.
Okay. So like you're saying, even you said you prefer to watch men World Cup, but even at that level, the game is more man on man domination by speed and strength more than their tactical ability. I mean, I know you're not saying that they don't have great tactical game, but
right.
You're saying when you watch the product, that's not as important in their game as in the women's game.
Right. So you have a lot of good players in professional soccer that may not have great tactical ability, but they have the ability to just get the ball from you, whether you're a defense or you're a midfielder or whatever the case is. Or you have people that are up top, attackers that are super fast, that can get the ball over the top and make a pass in. So
just a pure athlete.
Right, World Cup, I mean, they're all tactically great. You wouldn't be on an international squad
right.
if you're not. But when it comes to watching the women specifically, let's say the women's national team for the United States, you can see their progression, their plays build up.
Like the plays and the...
Right. Whether maybe that's because it's slower. Maybe because the gameplay is slower and you could see the passes and the formations, and that could be the case too. But I think that tactically the United States women's team is fantastic, and I like watching it. Now again, you watch the men's team play, and compared to the Argentinas, the Brazils, the Germanys, England, Italy, like they're not up to par. They're just not.
Would you say that that's would looking at basketball, even though you said you don't enjoy the WNBA, would that be a good analogy as far as like when you watch the NBA? A lot of times it's just like who is the dog on the court, like who is the big man that has the skill to go one-on-one and just take over the whole court, versus maybe watching women's basketball, which I don't, but if I did, I'm thinking maybe they have more pure basketball playmaking and passing and more of a pure product, versus when you watch a lot of times in the NBA, it's just like a one-on-one situation all the time. Is that maybe similar to what you're saying with soccer?
Kind of, sort of. I think for the WNBA, it's a mixture of things. I mean, you were watching the game on TV, because I've watched it in the past. There's no one in the stands. It's a slow game. No one's scoring. It's all layups. It's very repetitive. It's just like you watch an NBA game, it's just people are just sinking threes and dunking, and it's just a different game. It's almost like you're not really watching a true basketball game.
I see what you mean.
And there's some great shooters in the WNBA.
The goal is the same height, and obviously
right.
they're not going to have the same
right now. If I knew
typically.
more about the game of basketball tactically, maybe I would enjoy it more.
But
I don't know. I mean, how many people are out there watching women's basketball? Like, wow, look at that pass. I don't know.
If I can get a follow-up to this first one, did you have a take on the judge ruling against the U.S. women's national team in their equal pay fight?
Yes, I think it comes down to one thing, that they struck a bad deal in their contract, and that was like the clear thing. That's what the judge noted. They struck a bad deal in their contract initially with their CBA, that they noticed that they would have made more money going the other way. You know, because they fall for things like a base pay and bonuses and maternity leave, which is all great and it should be given to them. But if they stuck with just the bonuses, because they're a very successful team in, you know, let's say a league or the international league, which is very weak, they would have been getting paid more than they currently are, right? Because right now they're getting paid more than the men. But because of the success, if they reformatted their contract, it would have been better. So, I mean, I agree with the judge. I think he made a good call, but whoever is representing this women's team should have been smarter than that. Should have known that this was going to get thrown out. And then there are some other things that are going to stick and they might figure out. And another thing is, it goes back to revenue. You know, the men, even though they're not as successful, they generate more revenue. Not only because of the United States team, because there's players in that team that play internationally. So you have jersey sales, you have a bunch of other things. You have for individual players, you have sponsorships, which doesn't even go on to their, you know, salaries for the United States team. So, I mean, there's a lot that go into play. Now, I don't know.
I would agree. The judge said you can't retroactively call this discrimination that you agreed to, you know, your own deal. So I thought that was fair. And I think a big part of it comes down to the marketplace, not gender discrimination per se, but if you are having to pay men to play on your team and they have a lot of other options of other ways they can make money in the game, then you have to pay them a certain amount. Whereas with women, they're not going to have as many other options internationally or at home to make money playing the game. So market-wise, you don't have to pay them as much.
Right.
So I think when it comes to female versus male sports, you can't deny the facts of typically men being a bigger draw, especially like with the World Cup and how much FIFA pays the teams. The FIFA's going to pay the men's champion way more than the women's champion. That doesn't have to do with the U.S. Soccer Federation. That has to do with sponsorship money and FIFA.
Right.
But, you know, they did have a decent case, though, because, you know, at home, they did have a more average per game profits than the men, and they had to go all the way to the World Cup, essentially, to make the same amount of money as the men. So I'm not saying they didn't have any arguments on their side, but I definitely think the judge got it right.
Right, and another thing is the past, 3 or 4 women's World Cups, directly after the World Cup, they try to rebirth the women's soccer league in the United States. And the attendance is decent, and it slowly drops off. Mm-hmm. And again, World Cup hits, same thing.
It's like a novelty. Yeah, let's go to a game.
Right, and it fails every time. I mean, attendance is awful. Tickets, they're giving them away. I mean, I think that says a lot. It's a business at the end of the day. This isn't a public school. This isn't a, you know, like, it's a business, period. You know, I would like to see if the United States wasn't successful, would this still be a case? You know what I mean? Like, if they didn't just win the World Cup, or, you know, whenever the last time it was, I forgot. Like, is this going to even be a conversation?
Well, when it comes to the U.S. Soccer Federation, that's a non-profit. So I don't know that it's, in that specific case, business, but it is still dollars and cents, right? It still is. We have to operate, and we can't just, if the men in the marketplace are going to require this much for us to have a team, to field a team, we can't necessarily pay the same exact amount to the other side merely because, you know, for the sake of equality of the sexes, if it doesn't make sense for us in terms of sponsorships and so forth moving forward. Like right now, you could see, okay, the women win and they get a huge bursts of sponsorship money, and maybe right now that they are the big draw. Like you said, you enjoy watching the women's American team more than the men's or whatever, but down the road that may not be the case. And if it continues to be and they continue to dominate, then I'm sure over time they will end up getting as much or more money than the men, and they would deserve that in this narrow case.
Do you think, I mean, if the United States wasn't in the final, what are the views like for FIFA? Like that's what that's
Women's World Cup?
Right, that's the stats that I would want to see. So what justifies FIFA saying, hey, ladies, you're going to get paid X, Y, and Z because look at all these views? You know what I mean? It just doesn't make sense to me.
No, and everybody, it's true that when the women went all the way to the semifinals and the finals, we took notice, we watched, I turned it on, it was exciting, that's great for them. But it was nowhere near the level if our men actually made it to the World Cup. The whole country would stop. I mean, it would be, everybody would be talking about it rather than just a few millennials and, soccer dads and moms and so forth. It would be truly something that, I mean, we celebrated it, but would we care more if it were the men? I'm pretty sure. That's probably politically incorrect to say, but
it's not because you don't like women.
Right.
It's not because you're discriminating against women. It's just that it's not there.
Yeah. It's
naturally
just,
not, the interest isn't there.
Right. Like I have a daughter. It'd be cool if she plays sports. I don't really care if I have a son, if he plays a sports or not. I don't care either way, really. But if my daughter plays sports, that would be awesome. I would enjoy watching, and rooting for her. But that doesn't change the fact when I tune into TV that I want to watch the most physically, dominant folks play sports, which, is almost always men. That's just the science.